Hi there guys and girls, and welcome to this second part in the Exchange 2016 series. In this session we'll be looking at getting the environment up and running, ready to do some learning and some tweaking. In this session we are going to do the following: install Windows features using Windows PowerShell, install the Unified Communications runtime. Again, these first two parts are the prerequisites required to support then we're going to extend the schemas and get your Active Directory environment ready for Exchange 2016. In part 4 we'll then install Exchange 2016 using the command line. So what we'll be using is this PowerShell set of commands to install the prerequisites required for Exchange 2016 on Windows 2016. I'll include these in the comments below. Then we'll install the Unified Managed API runtime from the link shown on screen. Point to note is that that KB article should be applied to the OS. However, make sure it's relevant. Ideally, you would be updating your devices, making sure your Windows Server is up to date before you start the process of this installation. Then we will prepare Active Directory with schema updates, etc., that are required to take those values 2016 adds to your Active Directory schema. Now, something that's quite important, and I need to stress, can't stress it enough, is that you should always have a valid backup and recovery process, because these changes in production are one-way changes. There is no undo schema update. You need to recover your Windows environment. Now, if you have no recovery process, you have no way of ensuring that should this go wrong, invariably it won't go wrong, but if it does, that you have a process to recover Active Directory. Now, if you don't, stop what you're doing. Please don't do this into production as it is. For a lab it's fine because you burn it, you start again. If you're doing this or running through this in live, I would stop as you do right now. If you don't have the recovery process, read the link that's on the screen and get that process created. Most change control boards require you to have that recovery point, and as a point of best practice in general for Active Directory, that should exist. It sounds like I'm labouring it, but it's very important to have it, because you don't want to go to your line manager, to the CTO, to anybody who's got a bigger paycheck than you to say it's toast, because unfortunately that won't go down too well. As part of this process, we'll check the schema versions pre-setup and then post-setup. Again, very useful to report back on the success of any change that you're putting through, and also is a good thing to check as we step through this process to make sure that what you're expecting is actually happening as required. And finally, in the preparation phase, we will be preparing Active Directory to accept the new Exchange environment. Now, if you haven't got an organisation name defined, please again stop, go back to the business and say, or get one defined, because you can't. Once you do this, and you start deploying objects to your new Exchange organization, you really can't go back and start changing the organization name. And then finally, the last section is installation of Exchange 2016. Now this will take some time, so get a coffee, a water, a freshly squeezed orange juice, whatever, but you're going to have to sit down and make some time for this. Depending on your hardware, it can take a fairly long time. And as a bonus, a lot of people, especially in my experience, when they have hybrid, they want to keep the management tool or the admin console tools available, and they have a whole server just for it. Now you can install it on a workstation, Windows 8 and above, if you use the following code, PowerShell code displayed, then you will be able to do that on your workstation or Windows 2012 machine going forward, if you so wish. So let's go and actually do the install. So here we are at an administrator PowerShell prompt. Now what I've done, I've bundled up those commands as shown in the first section in just a PowerShell script. Then I'm just running that as it is. It takes a few moments to spin up and import all the required commandlets. And as you can see, if by magic and the power of editing, that it'll come back and say it's happy and it's installed out the issues. Now at this point, I would certainly recommend a reboot to make sure that everything's applied, configured correctly. And so we're now back on the other side of the reboot. Windows has updated itself, reconfigured itself, and it's now on to installing the runtime components for media control. Again, this is just a case of running through the defaults, letting it do its thing, and there's not much more. It's next, 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 done. So now it's back into an admin PowerShell prompt. We're going to quickly just check the schema version, the Exchange schema version, pre-setup. As you can see, it's blank. So let's move on now to the Exchange 2016 actual prerequisite setup. So this is extending the schema and getting Active Directory ready and willing to receive. So as you can see here, I've gone to a command prompt and run the setup from some files that I've copied locally. You can run this from the ISO CD if you're running it from a bit of tin, and this will just go through and check that it's got everything it needs through those PowerShell scripts or the script that we ran earlier in this process. Now I've shortened the process down because I'm sure that you guys don't really want to be sitting through a lot of percentage bars. Everybody does it in their day-to-day job quite a lot, so you know, you don't really want to watch it again. So again, this is just a case of extending the schema, getting it ready for the updates to happen. If you've already got Exchange installed, that schema will just be extended to get the newer attribute required. Just to point out, most CUs for Exchange 2016 and 2013 don't come with schema upgrades, but those that do, they will tell you in their release notes. So now that the schema has been extended, what we'll be doing now is just going to go and check that that schema has been extended. As you can see from the previous empty value, there is now a value of 15.330. So that's the latest version as to when I recorded this video. If you're seeing it in the future, your schema version will be different. So now back to the command prompt, and now we're going to actually set up or extend Active Directory to support your new Exchange environment. Again, running the above command. So again, through the power of editing, I have actually shortened this process. So a lot of the time will be taken on copying files. The actual sort of checking and updates, again, are dependent on your system, but the prerequisite checks and the organization preparation should be relatively quick, because at this point they're only writing empty values into the Active Directory schema. But depending on the size of your environment, etc., etc., it's also worth pointing out that this should also be all ran in the same site as your schema master. Otherwise, you just do it in a server that's within your schema master site. If you've only got one, great, because that's always going to be. But check with your AD guy if you'll split roles where your schema master is, and ensure that you actually have access to it, or they can run this for you separately. I like to run these separately purely as they make change controls a lot easier, because you section these off and put these as stage gates in terms of actual checks and balance for the change control people and the business. The business likes to see tick boxes that says success, success. The actual setup process will do a lot of checking, a lot of pre-checking, and it will stop a lot of the time if there's something not quite right. However, if you've set up the prerequisites correctly and you've got full access to Active Directory as required, then yeah, you shouldn't find it at all a problem. If you've just added yourself to the schema admins without a reboot or log on or log off, then you'll find that you'll get errors, but they can be resolved by just logging off the server and logging back on. It's just a case of the group membership being refreshed or log on to the particular servers that you're running. So as you can see here, we're all prerequisite, we're all set up, and now it will be on to actually installing the actual binaries, the actual applications for Exchange 2016. This will take some time. Uncompressed, it's 5.5 gig, and it gets a lot bigger once it's been installed. Now I'm just installing to the default location on the C drive on this server. I personally wouldn't, in production, put this on the main system disk, simply because the amount of log files that are by default turned on, it will soon swell that C drive, and that's of course unless you've got massive OS disks. But then I wouldn't recommend it even then, simply because of the amount of I/O that Exchange produces. Things like database drives, log files, pickup fuckup folders, etc. I will be adding additional disks to this server, or virtual disks to this server, to mimic what I would always do in production. So Exchange does very well with high I/O disks, although with 2016, 2013, it's getting less and less of a requirement. I mean, obviously, if you find the cost of buying hardware, virtual machines, underlying LUNs, etc., expensive, then I'd always consider going to Office 365 to mitigate that cost, because all you're then paying for is the user access, and that's it. And that comes with the relevant bundled services all provided for you. But if you are installing Exchange 2016 locally, then you can get away with JBOD. You just have to take good care of how you configure your disks, and try not to share them with anything that's I/O intensive. So if you're running on VMware or Hyper-V, and you've got the LUNs for the database on a drive that's used by a SQL server, then I would recommend that you move it to a different LUN or dedicate it to the LUN set or disk set. If you virtualize Exchange, you should always treat it as if it was a physical server. So Microsoft have a number of recommendations and white papers on virtualizing Exchange with Hyper-V and VMware, to that matter. Again, VMware and Microsoft agree that you should always treat the LUN, the disk allocation, the same as if it was a physical box. That's all the way down to the LUNs that it sits on. Just because it's virtual doesn't mean it's fast. So as you can see here, this is just a case of it's copying the binaries over, quite a few of them, and stepping through that process. Now this process should be nice and clear, because we've done all the prerequisites, we've got the servers up to date, and it's just a case of running through it. This can take an hour or so, again, but it depends on your hardware. It's also important to point out this can also be done through the GUI interface. If you just run setup from the extracted files, then it will take you through a GUI version of this. Now, I've seen that enough times in my life to not see it again, but it's also very important to understand as an Exchange administrator that what goes on underneath that installer. So there's nothing different that the GUI gives you that this doesn't. But now, it's better to take it through this non-graphical installation, simply so that you understand the stages and steps that Exchange does and what the changes it does under the hood. So here are the last couple of services that it's actually setting up. You'll also notice that the transport service, the mailbox service, the unified messaging service, the client access service, they all replace the individual roles that used to be within Exchange 2013, Exchange 2010, all the way back to Exchange 2007, when they consolidated the roles. But they are now all just services that run on the multi-role servers. So this just finishes up, cleans itself up, deletes temporary files, yada yada yada, like all good programs do. Yeah, okay. But no, so this final piece is all good. So once this is finished, it will be just one more reboot, and that will ensure that everything's clean, clear, and that all the services start as they should do. So here we are on the back end of the reboot from the installation. Now what we're going to do now is just jump into the Exchange Management Console, or Exchange Management Shell, sorry. Just to confirm that everything's all good, it can talk to Active Directory, and that the values for the exchange, this particular exchange server has been populated and functioning. Now, this is always a good test that if the local server cannot connect to the console or to the management shell, then something's not gone right in the install, or there's something blocking the access to it. So as you can see here, this is your standard sort of PowerShell environment management shell. So this will now connect to the local server and import the relevant PowerShell commandlets into that process. So once these commandlets or these modules have been imported, we are just going to run the get exchange server commandlet. Again, you can tab through, get exchange server. This just returns the exchange server. Now we're just going to do an FL on that, and that'll give us a bit more detail onto the actual server. And as you can see, standard defaults configured. Always useful to do this, just to make sure that everything's there. So what we're going to do now, we're going to log on to the actual admin center. Now, what you'll find is that you won't be able to log on to the admin center. This is simply because, and it's a gotcha that I've come across once or twice. Essentially, the setup process does no longer gives the administrator or the account that set it up. It doesn't actually create a mailbox. Now, it needs a mailbox for it to be able to actually log on to the actual admin center. So as you can see, I managed to type my password in wrong, but we'll give it another go. So everything's groovy, signing in, logging in, it'll come up with an error message. Now, you'll get this HTTP 500 error if there's no mailbox assigned to the admin account or the account that you're logging in with for the first time. So to rectify that, if we go back to the Exchange Management Shell, run it as an administrator, and what we'll do, we'll quickly just create a mailbox for the admin account, or any account that you're actually using to administer this with. So as you can see, we just run the command new mail user and the user account. I don't really care what email address. This is not going to be going, or not going to be using any sort of email going forward. But just by creating that mailbox it will give it the required sort of default policy settings, which is you just have to use it with a standard email address. So that's all fine. So what we'll do, we'll just jump back into the admin center and give it a few moments. Again, still get this message because it's a self-signed cert. Log back in, click sign in. As you can see, the little spinner. I think Microsoft were first with the fidget spinner. And eventually this will log me into the admin center, and here we go. So it just takes a few moments to enumerate going forward. As I said, I'm not running server class hardware. This is actually running off of my laptop at the moment. It's quite a decent laptop, but so we can close this management shell, and as you can see, this essentially is a very basic functioning Exchange server, Exchange 2016 server. In the next couple of sessions, what we'll do, we'll go through and we will start configuring it ready to do some learning, and that's it, guys and girls. So I will see you in the next one. I've got some interesting things coming up other than Exchange, so stay tuned. Subscribe if you like to, share if you like to, please comment below. Again, feedback is always good for everybody, positive, negative. If you just want to say hi, and I'll give you a shout out. Catch you later.